Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening a file that sits right at this incredibly uncomfortable intersection. We're talking medical ethics, severe trauma, and really the absolute darkest parts of the human psyche.
Yeah, it's a heavy one today.
It really is. We are unpacking The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. And, usually when we cover thrillers on this deep dive, we expect a pretty clear-cut villain.
Right? Like a stalker or murderer.
Exactly, or maybe a vengeful ghost or something. But this source material, it forces us to look at a 6-year-old girl and ask a question that feels, honestly, almost taboo. Is this child a victim, or is she a predator?
It's a brutal question, and what makes Barry's work stand out so much here is that she actually isn't just a writer. She's a former trauma psychologist.
Which changes everything.
It completely changes the lens.
Right.
When she describes the disintegration of a family or the behavior of a disturbed child, she isn't relying on cheap horror tropes. She is pulling directly from clinical reality.
Right.
It's that authenticity that makes the whole thing just so unsettling for you to read.
Exactly. And that is basically our mission today. We aren't just going to recap the plot of the Bauer family, Christopher and Hannah. We want to actually understand the mechanics of what happens when you bring a severely, profoundly damaged child into a normal home.
Right, we're going to break down the actual psychology.
Yeah, concepts like reactive attachment disorder, this manipulation tactic called triangulation, and we'll really explore how having a savior complex can actually just completely destroy a marriage.
Because this story is essentially a clinical case study in how altruism can go horribly, horribly wrong.
So let's open the case file. It starts with a discovery that is basically the stuff of actual nightmares. Case number 5243. Police find a child wandering around in a parking lot. And the initial report is, well, it's gruesome. She's found wearing nothing but a dirty diaper and a dog collar.
And because of her size, the immediate assumption by law enforcement and even the first medical staff who see her is that she's a toddler.
Because she's so tiny.
Right, she is tiny, she's severely malnourished, and she's totally nonverbal. But this is where the medical reality hits that first massive wall. She gets brought to the hospital, and we meet Christopher Bauer.
The husband.
Exactly. He's an orthopedic surgeon at the hospital, and he's one of the very first doctors to really examine her. He looks at her x-rays, he looks at her her teeth, and he realizes pretty quickly that this is not a 3-year-old. She is 6.
Just stop there for a second. To be 6 years old but the size of a 3-year-old, I mean, we are talking about starvation on a massive, massive scale, right?
We are talking about severe chronic starvation. In clinical contexts, we sometimes refer to this as psychosocial dwarfism.
Psychosocial dwarfism.
Yeah, it's where extreme stress, trauma, and starvation literally halt the body's production of growth hormones. The body just stops growing to conserve energy for basic survival.
Wow.
And Christopher finds calcified bones, which means she's had breaks that just healed without a cast. Her elbow is actually fused at a 90-degree angle because a major fracture just healed that way entirely on its own.
That is horrific.
Her body is essentially a roadmap of torture.
And naturally, Christopher is horrified by this. I think literally anyone would be. But he doesn't just treat her physical injuries. He gets attached. And it happens incredibly fast.
It does. And this is so critical for understanding the absolute disaster that follows. Christopher steps into this savior role immediately.
Right.
He sleeps in a chair by her bed in the hospital. He buys her all these toys. He holds her hand during blood draws. He sees this broken little bird, Janie, and his brain, the brain of a surgeon who literally fixes broken things for a living, decides, I can fix this.
But isn't that just a normal human reaction? You see a suffering child, you naturally want to help.
Oh, compassion is completely normal. But Christopher's reaction borders on obsession right from the jump. He loses all professional objectivity, and there is a voice of reason trying to stop him.
The social worker.
Yes, Piper Goldstein. She's the social worker assigned to the case, and she is waving a massive red flag right in his face. She warns him about child abuse syndrome.
Can we define that really quick? Because to a layman, that phrase just sounds like, she was abused. What is Piper actually trying to warn him about?
She's warning him about the neurological rewiring that happens when a child is subjected to profound abuse from infancy. We aren't just talking about a kid having bad memories or being shy.
Right, it's biological.
Exactly. We are talking about a brain that has developed entirely in survival mode. The neural pathways for trust, for bonding, for basic empathy, those might not even exist.
They just never formed.
Right. So Piper is essentially saying, you cannot just love this out of her. This is permanent structural damage.
But Janie doesn't act like a monster in the hospital. And I think that's the really tricky part here. She acts incredibly sweet. She calls him Dr. Chris, and then pretty quickly she starts calling him Daddy.
which is the honeymoon phase.
Oh.
Or, more accurately, from a clinical standpoint, it's a survival strategy.
Oh, interesting.
Janie is incredibly smart. She realizes Christopher has the power. He controls the resources, the safety, the food. So she simply mirrors what he wants to see. She charms him. It's not real affection on her end, it's adaptation.
Which brings us to Hannah, Christopher's wife. She's a nurse at the exact same hospital. And she is, let's just say, she is a lot less enthusiastic about this whole new development.
Hannah is really the tragic figure here in so many ways. She brings her own really heavy baggage to the table. She and Christopher have struggled with infertility for years.
Yeah, failed IVF, failed adoptions.
Exactly. She is totally desperate to be a mother. But, and this is the key distinction, she wants a baby. She wants that fresh start. So she looks at Janie, this severely traumatized 6-year-old with a mysterious, clearly violent past. And Hannah's gut just screams no.
But Christopher just completely steamrolls her. He's relentless about it.
Because he weaponizes her guilt.
Yeah.
He knows she feels terribly guilty about not being able to give him a biological child. So he frames adopting Janie as this sort of destiny, this higher calling.
Right.
He says things like, "We have the resources. We're medical professionals. Who is better equipped than us?" And Hannah finally agrees. Not because she actually wants Janie, but because she wants to support Christopher. She actively suppresses her own intuition just to save her marriage.
So they bring Janie home. Christopher is on cloud 9 thinking, we have love, we have money, we've totally got this.
The classic rescue fantasy. It's this naive belief that love is just a universal cure-all. But the moment they walk through the front door of their house, the dynamic completely shifts. And this is where we really need to talk about triangulation.
Right. We mentioned this in the intro. In a psychological context, what exactly is triangulation?
Triangulation is a manipulation tactic where person A controls the entire dynamic between person B and person C by constantly playing them against each other.
Okay.
It stabilizes the manipulator and totally destabilizes the victims. And Janie does this masterfully. To Christopher, she is the sweet, wounded, perfect angel. But the absolute second he leaves the house for work, she turns on Hannah.
And it's not just normal kid stuff like, I don't like you. It's actually violent.
It's primal. We're talking hours-long, screaming rages. And the truly disturbing part isn't just the screaming, it's the intense self-harm. She will intentionally bang her own head on the hardwood floor until she literally passes out.
There's that one scene, the refrigerator incident, which I think really highlights the physical danger in the house.
Right. Because of her starvation history, food is a massive, massive trigger for her. They actually have to put a padlock on the fridge.
Which is wild to think about in a normal suburban kitchen.
It is. And Janie tries to break into it, and when she can't, she flies into this violent rage that requires Hannah to physically restrain her on the floor.
Yeah.
Hannah's essentially wrestling a feral animal in her own kitchen.
And then when Christopher comes home from work,
Janie just switches it off instantaneously, like a light switch. She cries. She looks incredibly small and helpless. And Christopher looks at Hannah, who is sweaty, exhausted, totally angry, and he immediately thinks Hannah's a problem.
wow.
He thinks Hannah's being way too harsh, or that she's projecting her own unhappiness about the infertility onto this poor child.
That is just so infuriating to read. Why can't he see it? He's a doctor. He's supposed to be trained to be observant.
Because Janie has successfully split his reality. In psychology, splitting is a defense mechanism where a person categorizes others as all good or all bad.
No gray area.
Exactly. Janie has made Christopher the good object and Hannah the bad object. By keeping Christopher's hands totally clean, she ensures he stays entirely on her side.
Because if she acted out with him too.
They would team up. If she were a monster to both of them, Christopher and Hannah would form a united front to solve the problem. But by splitting them, she divides and conquers the entire house.
There is one specific scene that really vividly illustrates this extreme level of manipulation. The goodnight standoff. I mean, this wasn't just a temper tantrum. It felt like an actual hostage situation.
It is absolutely the turning point in the story where the manipulation becomes completely undeniable. Their therapist, Dr. Chandler, tells Christopher that he really needs to start setting firm boundaries.
Right, because Janie has been ignoring Hannah completely.
Right. Selective mutism.
Yeah.
She is refusing to even acknowledge that Hannah exists.
Yeah.
So Christopher finally tries to put his foot down and says, "I won't say goodnight to you unless you say goodnight to Hannah first."
Which seems totally reasonable. It's just saying, hey, we are a united front.
Theoretically, yes, it's great parenting,
Okay.
but you cannot use normal, rational logic with a child who has severe reactive attachment issues. Janie doesn't comply. She escalates.
Oh, boy.
She screams for hours, and when screaming doesn't break him, she starts aggressively chewing on her own lip.
Literally chewing it until it starts gushing blood.
Yes. She forces Christopher into a corner. She knows that if she hurts herself badly enough, his deep-seated savior instinct will override his parent instinct. He has to rush in and stop the bleeding. He won't be able to help himself.
And he does. He rushes in, turns on the light, tends to her lip.
And the boundary is just gone, vaporized. Janie wins the standoff. She proved it to him that she can withstand significantly more pain than he can. She held her own body hostage just to regain control of Christopher.
It's terrifying.
It's a profound level of dysfunction. It shows that her need for control completely overrides her basic biological instinct for self-preservation.
That is terrifying. And then she takes this whole show on the road. Let's talk about the Target incident.
Yeah, this is where the gaslighting goes fully public.
Yeah.
They're in Target, and Janie calmly knocks over rows of shampoo bottles in an aisle. Hannah tries to physically stop her, and Janie immediately drops to the floor and screams at the top of her lungs, "Mommy, stop! You're hurting me!"
Which obviously acts like a dog whistle to every single stranger in the store.
Exactly. She knows the social script. She knows perfectly well that a screaming child and a visibly frustrated mother equals bad mom in the eyes of the public.
She weaponizes society's judgment against Hannah.
She does. It makes Hannah feel absolutely crazy, like the whole world is looking at her as the villain, and Janie is just this poor little victim.
So let's dig into the why of all this. Why is it Hannah? Hannah feeds her, Hannah bathes her, clothes her. Hannah is the one actually doing the hard work of mothering day in and day out. Why is she the specific target of all this rage?
Dr. Chandler's insight here is really fascinating. It's actually not about Hannah as an individual person. It's entirely about the archetype.
What do you mean?
Well, to Janie, the concept of mother doesn't mean safety or warm cookies or hugs. Mother means pain. Her biological mother was her abuser. So Hannah represents the original source of her trauma.
Just because she fills that specific role in the house.
Right. Christopher represents something entirely new to her, a male protector. But Hannah represents the enemy. There's a therapy session with a dollhouse that basically confirms this whole theory. Janie is playing, and she sets up a daddy doll and a girl doll, and they're eating ice cream, having a fun time.
And the mommy.
Removed from the house entirely, erased. Janie isn't actually looking for a family. She's looking for exclusive possession. She wants to possess the savior, and the mother is just an obstacle that needs to be removed.
Now, while this incredibly intense domestic horror show is playing out, we do get these glimpses of the actual police investigation happening in the background. We learn where Janie came from, and it really explains a lot.
It confirms the raised like a dog theory. The police investigate the trailer she came from, and they find a closet filled with zip ties and that specific collar.
God.
But the real twist here is about the mother, Becky Watson. She wasn't just neglecting Janie, she was actively using her. Becky ran all these terrible scams GoFundMe pages where she would actually shave Janie's head to pretend the kid had cancer so people would donate money.
So Janie was just a prop to her, a tool for profit.
Exactly. She learned from infancy that she was just an object to be manipulated by adults, so now she manipulates others. That is her primary language.
Right.
But there's an even darker layer to the investigation. The police go to interview the grandmother, Sue, who is currently in jail. And Sue doesn't say, "Oh, my poor grandbaby, I hope she's okay."
No, she says Janie was born woke, which is such a weird phrase.
That phrase chills me every single time I read it. Born woke. Sue claims that Janie never slept as a baby, never cried. She just laid there and stared.
Just observing?
Yeah. Sue admits to beating her, which obviously shows us this horrible generational cycle of abuse. But she also insists that Janie was just bad from the very start. It brings up that age-old nature versus nurture debate.
Was Janie made into a monster by the abuse, or was there something inherently broken about her neurology from day one?
And that ambiguity is exactly what makes the story so scary. You really can't tell where the trauma ends and her actual personality begins.
And meanwhile, back at the Bower house, the isolation for Hannah is just growing exponentially. Christopher's parents and Hannah's parents both come for a visit, and Janie manages to pull off her greatest performance yet. She is delightful, she plays nicely with the cousins, she charms the grandparents.
Which, of course, just makes Hannah look like a complete liar.
Right, because nobody sees the monster.
It's the ultimate form of gaslighting. If Janie acts like a perfect little angel for Grandma, then Hannah's stories about the violent rages and the self-harm just sound like totally unhinged exaggerations.
Yeah.
It just reinforces Christopher's view that Hannah simply isn't trying hard enough. He thinks, look, literally everyone else loves her. Why can't you?
There is one moment, though, like a tiny blip on the radar where things actually seem to work. The potty training.
Yes. They actually have a genuine breakthrough. Janie learns to use the toilet. There's laughter in the house. Hannah actually feels a surge of confidence as a mother.
And that's the trap, isn't it? That little hit of dopamine.
In an abusive dynamic, whether it's an adult relationship or parent-child, that is called intermittent reinforcement.
Intermittent reinforcement.
Yeah. Because if it was bad, 100% of the time you'd just leave, you'd tap out. But that 1% of hope, that keeps you totally hooked, it lowers their guard just enough for them to commit to the adoption permanently. They literally signed the final papers just because they had that one good week.
And then right after that high, the crash comes hard. Christopher goes back to his normal work schedule, and Janie severely punishes Hannah for it.
The silence. She stopped speaking to Hannah entirely. For weeks, she will whisper to Christopher, she'll chat happily with complete strangers, but she looks right through Hannah like she is made of glass.
And Hannah says explicitly to Christopher she's doing this on purpose. But Christopher just keeps saying, no, she's a child. She doesn't know how to be mean.
Christopher is operating on standard textbook developmental psychology. He thinks children act out because they're confused or they're hurt. But Hannah is realizing something much darker. Janie acts out to dominate. Hannah sees the actual malice in Janie's eyes. A malice that Christopher totally refuses to acknowledge because it completely conflicts with his identity as the savior.
Because if she's malicious...
If Janie is truly malicious, then Christopher hasn't saved a broken child. He's just imported a predator into his home. And his ego simply cannot handle that reality.
It's just a tragedy of conflicting realities. You have two people who genuinely started out wanting to do something good, and they're just being completely torn apart by the very person they tried to save.
It's the total disintegration of empathy. Christopher loses all empathy for Hannah because he's so hyper-focused on Janie, and Hannah loses all empathy for Janie because she's trapped in pure survival mode. The predator in the house doesn't even have to lift a finger anymore. The parents are doing the work of destroying each other.
So we've looked at the medical evidence, the psychological manipulation, the triangulation. What is the real takeaway here? Because The Perfect Child isn't just a scary story to read on a plane. It feels like a really profound warning about the limitations of compassion.
I think the takeaway is absolutely about the limits of love. We are raised on this very comforting narrative, especially in our movies and our books, that love heals all wounds. If you just love a child enough, they will eventually heal.
Right, the power of love.
But this story suggests that some wounds don't heal at all. They just infect everything around them.
It really forces you to ask, can you actually save someone who has been formed entirely by hate?
And even more disturbingly, what happens when that child grows up?
Yeah.
Janie is 6 years old in this story. She can be physically restrained by an adult. But what happens when she's 16? If the empathy centers of her brain are truly permanently dark, time doesn't heal her. It just makes the predator more sophisticated.
That is a chilling thought. You know, sometimes the monster isn't hiding under the bed. Sometimes you're the one tucking it in at night.
And sometimes you're the one having to lock your own bed and door from the outside just to survive.
Wow, and it makes you wonder. If a 6-year-old with no resources can systematically dismantle two highly educated medical professionals from the inside out, what kind of devastation is she going to be capable of at 25 when society at large becomes her playground? Is the trauma response we label as psychopathy actually just human evolution's ultimate, most terrifying survival mechanism? It's something to think about. That's it for this deep dive into The Perfect Child. Thanks for listening and sleep tight.